Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with the story in which the management of the family clinic was very irresponsible, so they lost some of their employees. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Crappy employers get a nice surprise after I leave. Okay, so I work for a small family doctor's office, my first job out of school. I always wanted to do right by my patients. All these employers wanted to do was make money. No concern for employees who drop like flies and patients who were constantly mad. Instead of actually caring about the patient's concerns, they spent more time micromanaging staff to the point where they even put timers on our computers and a GPS app on our phones that functioned as a punch clock. They even had managers monitor security cameras to make sure everyone was slaving away. None of us had any workspaces, and doing simple things like taking a break or listening to music was not allowed. Clearly, if we had time to be human, we couldn't possibly be working hard enough. The owners would never spend money. They didn't buy paper towels, our bathrooms didn't have soap, we didn't have water or even cups. There was no coffee or break room. People ate lunch in their cars alone because there was no space or utensils. We also had to pay for our own training because they would offer to cover it, then make getting reimbursed really hard. But that's just the beginning. They also cut corners when it came to patient safety and privacy. They were too cheap to buy masks for providers for when patients came in with diseases like tuberculosis. When I asked about this, they told me I was being a baby. Lastly, they required providers to use personal computers for tasks involving patient data, a major HIPAA violation. Once again, they told me I was wrong when I brought it up. By the way, these are the same personal computers that they put timers on. Now for the fun part. One of the owner's favorite employees was pregnant. The owners wanted to have a party for her, but spend no money. How would they do it? Well, they knew I had a good relationship with pharmaceutical reps. It just so happened that I had one coming on that Monday. The baby shower was scheduled for Friday. Now, the pharmaceutical reps usually brought lunch for everyone and taught about the newest drug. They also brought samples and coupons for the patients. So cheap owners had a great plan. Move the baby shower to Monday so that the pharmaceutical rep brings lunch for everyone and they won't have to buy it. They even told me to switch the order from my usual Chick-fil-A to some fancy vegetarian restaurant because they were vegetarian. I ended up quitting one day before. The drug rep called my cell phone and asked about the lunch. He knew it was a baby shower and thought it was weird. I agreed and canceled the lunch, didn't tell the owners. I wish I could see their faces when the free food wasn't showing up. A day or two after I left, 2 other employees quit, and more will soon follow. I also reported them to the Board of Health and HIPAA. Their day will come soon. Unfortunately, that family doctor's office mindset is more and more what doctor's offices are becoming. The more patients they see, the more they get paid. They don't give 2 craps if you live or die. And our second story. Bank decides they won't cash and then deposit my checks anymore. I've had the same bank for over 15 years, and it's worth noting that the 2 businesses my family has I manage hold accounts at this bank. I basically work for myself, and it's a very seasonable job, so at the start of the season, after a mostly dormant winter, cash flow isn't that great. I usually hold a few of my paychecks in the business as things ramp up to help cover restocking after our slow winter. I cash out before payroll is due each quarter so as to not mess things up for accounting. This means that when I do write myself a check during the slow months, it's because I need it to cover something, usually the day of. When I deposit a check, $100 of it goes into my account immediately and the rest goes in at midnight. Now, I've learned in the past that they'll pull any and all transactions they can prior to depositing the money, and this has on more than one occasion caused me to be charged insufficient fund fees or transfer fees from my overdraft accounts. It's a crappy practice, but I've found the workaround. I would cash my checks, then deposit the cash, and it all would go in immediately. Problem solved. That was until 2 weeks ago when I went in to deposit my check, filled out the deposit slip as depositing cash, and waited in line for the next teller. I get called up by a teller I've never met and request to have my check cashed and then deposited. I didn't need the funds to go in immediately as we're out of the slow season, but I've gotten into the habit as I'm not a fan of their policy. I get told that they're no longer allowed to do it. I've been told this before by new tellers, and once they ask around, another teller that's been there a while and knows me will usually give the go-ahead to do it. It's coming from one account held at the bank and going into another so they can see the funds are there. Not anymore. That's when I learned they've decided to more strictly enforce a rule that up to this point I had been allowed to work around. It sucks, but as I said, I didn't need the money that day, so I just deposited it. This didn't sit well with me, so I went home and did some research. Turns out that my bank has two types of ATMs, some that require an envelope for a cash deposit, some that take the cash directly. The envelope-free ATMs have the added bonus of being able to, if deposited before 6 p.m., have the funds available immediately. I head in there this week to deposit another check, fill out my deposit slip for a cash deposit, and wait in line. When I get called up, it's a teller that's been there for at least 5 years and I have a working relationship with. I mention the new updated policy to verify it's true, and she confirms apologetically. I then ask about their ATM outside and whether it requires an envelope or is envelope-free. Turns out it's the latter. I then ask what stops me from cashing my check inside the branch, then walking outside to deposit the cash into the ATM so it can be available immediately. She looks at me with a blank stare. Teller: well, nothing really. Me: so I can cash this check inside, walk outside, and deposit the cash into the ATM, and will effectively be doing the same thing I've been doing for years, just with extra steps. Yes. I would like to cash this check, please. She takes the check and starts the process. A few moments later, she looks over at another teller that's been there just as long, if not longer, and asks, "Is this one of those instances I can use my better judgment?" Other teller: I think so. Teller: we're going to say this is a gray area and just cash and deposit it like before. Me: then this should speed things up, as I hand her the deposit slip I'd filled out earlier for cash. That was Monday, and I still smile about it every time I think about it. Odd thing is, while a lot of banks work that way, I have never had this problem with my credit union. It's almost like banks do what's best for stockholders and credit unions do what's best for members. And our last story. A Rubicon isn't worth your job. Dad is an electrician, but has a logistics company. Basically, he and his crew unload things from ships. He doesn't give a damn about clothing. All he likes to buy, like it's coffee in the morning, is tools. No matter what the tool's for, he just needs it. Anyways, I convinced him to buy a new car because he's earned it, blah, blah, blah. He always wanted a Jeep because he likes to go out on an adventure. He's from the country, but never learned how to drive properly. We went to our nearest dealership and were told to leave as they didn't want people like us. We were just a little dirty from work. Didn't even get dirty boots. We just drove to the nearest gas station, mad as hell. Occasionally, there was an old pal of my dad. Long story short, he was the son of an original owner of that Jeep dealership, but my dad didn't say anything about what happened. They just talked about electricity stuff and old times, and I was just eating. He invited my dad to his dealership and promised a nice discount if he could accept his son in our job, as my dad has connections inside the port. I was all right with that, but it was kind of bittersweet for my dad. Next week arrived, and he invited us to check on a Rubicon he had. Turns out we were a little too early, and he wasn't there yet. Same story. We got there, dude told us to literally F off, and another lady warned us with the police. If my dad was mad last time, he almost had a stroke this time. But we waited and waited until we saw this friend pull over to the dealership, and we did the same thing we tried last time. Enter the freaking dealership. This time it was kind of worse. That salesman was angry, and that lady started yelling, but we had an angel waving at my dad from the back, and he came closer. He noticed the show. That salesman told him that we wasted their time and didn't even look like we had the money to rent a car. The lady told him that we tried to get inside the cars. I've never seen a person go from white to red so quickly. The owner just yelled that we were friends of the family and that nobody deserves to be threatened the way we were. He also said that we could have easily bought every car they had, which is not true, but I take it as a compliment. The salesman was in pure shock. He looked like his soul just left his body, and the lady was in tears, shaking, and couldn't move. My dad's friend fired the salesman on the spot and guaranteed that his career as a salesman of any kind ended. The lady resulted to be his daughter and apologized to us and promised to give us extras on any car we bought. But later in a dinner, her mom explained that she was being abused by her partner, hence the reaction and her attitude. I'm glad she changed for good and everything went well for her. After all that, we came back the next day and the friend was too ashamed of what happened, didn't feel well, and had to close for the day. We got the Rubicon with a couple extras and a pretty good discount. He told us that he couldn't sleep that night and all he did was call his friends to warn them about this now unemployed salesman. And after that, he contacted the Ministerio de Trabajo, the entity that manages all work-related things, government stuff, Ecuador, and issued a letter about what happened. He just needed my dad's side of the story. My dad felt like he pulled the trigger on somebody's head when whoever took his explanation of the story told him all the repercussions of what happened will affect the salesman. She told him that he probably will be unemployed for a while, and if he ever tries to ask for a work visa, he'll get double-checked. But that my dad is free of pressing charges. He decided to not. It was enough. There are billionaires who wear clothes similar to mine. A guy who makes $20K a year, and salesmen are still going to judge people by their clothes? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.